promise a top-line education. But they pay dodgy agents offshore to drum up business.
The university managers had personal and financial relationships with the agents.
Turn a blind eye to cheating.
There is an unwritten rule not to fail students.
And turn out poorly trained graduates.
Would they have been safe in a hospital?
No. No way. Education is not an industry.
What is going on in our universities? Welcome to Four Corners. They're supposed to be centres of excellence in learning. They're supposed to be securing this country's economic future and social well-being through the next generations of well-educated graduates. They're selling access to millions of foreign students and reaping many billions of dollars of revenue. But now the alarm has been raised that increasingly Australian universities are exposing themselves to corrupt practice, to lower standards, to systemic abuse of the system. One instance you'll see tonight is the revelation from whistleblowers that some foreign students and other poor English speakers are graduating as nurses from Australian universities, dangerously underqualified. Universities have turned increasingly to foreign students regularly recruited through corrupt agencies to fill the gap left by a decline in funding from the public purse, which Education Minister Christopher Pyne wants to cut further. Academics are under pressure to pass students, irrespective of their ability, in order to keep revenue from overseas students flowing in. Linton Besser's story tonight reveals a sorry state: corruption, widespread plagiarism, cheating and exploitation.
On this trading floor, an Australian commodity is running hot. But it's not coal or iron ore for sale, it's our other major export to the world: tertiary education. This is the booming billion-dollar market in international students that now underpins the survival of Australia's universities.
Universities are fully aware there are problems with international student businesses they operate, but it is a very difficult problem they face. They are heavily dependent on the revenue. It's a cutthroat industry.
Right now, Australia is gripped by the question of how to pay for our university education. But there's a more fundamental question to be asked. What exactly are we getting for our money? Have our universities traded away academic standards in the race for cash?
There is a culture of leniency. Help them through, help them to get through. Do whatever it takes, bend over backwards, help them to get through. Let them resubmit and resubmit.
We've got to pass the vast majority of our students, no matter what their level is, no matter what their prior knowledge is, no matter how much or how little effort they put in.
The conditions within the university are conducive to corruption.
The New South Wales Independent Commission Against Corruption has got some big scalps, including some of the state's most corrupt politicians. Now it's turned its sights onto universities.
Students being exploited, students cheating, students bribing academics, academics being pressured to turn a blind eye to problems.
In a new report, Corruption Prevention Director Dr Robert Waldesy has raised the alarm about universities' troubling use of agents offshore to recruit students.
So every single university we spoke to has said that at some point they've had problems with some of their agents, with false documentation and often collusion with their students. The risk is they're going to put applicants through to the university with fake qualifications, or who they know have cheated on tests, or who are trying to undertake some sort of visa fraud.
Four Corners decided to find out how education agents operate in Australia's biggest overseas market, China. We went undercover inside agencies servicing Australia's universities. Vice-Chancellors have accepted as necessary the use of these unregulated middlemen to recruit the vast numbers of overseas students on whom they now rely. This Beijing agent is called Shinyway. It has represented universities including Queensland, Monash, Sydney, Newcastle, Southern Cross, ACU, ANU and UTS. Our undercover reporter is asking how the agent can help if his child has a poor academic record. He is then told Shinyway will accept a forged school transcript. This time, it's EduGlobal, who also represents a string of prestigious local universities, such as Monash, Melbourne, Queensland, Griffith, Tasmania, Southern Cross, Western Sydney, Macquarie and UTS. This hidden camera footage raises alarming questions about the integrity of international student admissions to a host of Australian universities. Four Corners undercover journalist also made a remarkable discovery about how lax English requirements are becoming to gain a student visa. This agency is EIC. She is promising special help to get around the robust English language test known as IELTS that has traditionally been used to enter an Australian university. Down the road is AOG, one of the biggest agents in the country. It made a similar offer. The agent suggests the student could sit an alternative exam called Versant. But it's not the same. It's much easier. Since 2012, the government has asked universities, not the Department of Immigration, to determine who gets a visa to enter the country to study. It no longer asks that entrants meet a nationally recognised standard. And universities, which are desperate to increase the flow of overseas students, can now decide how many come into the country.
The falsification of documents that comes through from students is often done in collusion with the agents themselves. In some cases, the universities have hired independent verifiers to check documents and qualifications, and only to find that the students and the agents have been colluding or bribing the document verifiers as well.
Barmak Nasirian is a Washington DC-based specialist on international education.
When you put such an agent, such a gatekeeper on commission, the risk that sending an adequate number of warm bodies may be paramount for them. The risk that they may engage in manipulation, embellishment, or other kinds of academic shenanigans just to make sure they meet their quota is not negligible.
In America, the College Code of Conduct has cautioned against the payment of incentives to offshore agents, and commissions have been banned domestically. There's no such ruling in Australia, even though universities have already been compromised by these relationships.
We were told in one case where the university managers had personal and financial relationships with the agents they were supposed to be overseeing. And the university now has to rotate its managers to stop that corruption developing.
These agents usually charge students and their families for their services. What they don't tell them is they also pocket often secret commissions from Australian universities seeking a winning edge over others around the world. In total, these commissions are estimated to amount to hundreds of millions of dollars per year. Students are none the wiser.
They were sort of trying to say that University of Sydney maybe is better.
Did the agent ever say that he or she was being paid by the universities as well?
No. Thinking maybe University of Sydney is paying them at a higher rate. Smells yummy.
Iris and Josie are just two of the 250,000 international students in Australia.
I've got no idea.
They might not know it, but they are the vital income stream keeping Australia's universities afloat.
I need to take a picture of my master.
But they're highly conscious of what it's costing their parents.
And Facebook and WeChat.
Just tell me again how much it is.
Oh, they used to be, last year it was 16,000 for each semester. This time it's 18,000. So it's pretty much, my parents say, after 4 years, we can buy you a house.
Iris and Josie are good students, but even they are under considerable pressure. Iris hopes her $140,000 degree will lead to a job in Australia and permanent residency, or PR.
And do you feel the pressure of how expensive that is? Do you think about that?
Yeah, I do, because my parents say you'd better stay in Australia and get a PR, otherwise if you come back to China, it's really pointless. You don't have...
But there are big obstacles to overcome. And the biggest of all is the English language.
The first semester of my first year, I just came into uni and I was doing an assignment with a local group. In the beginning, I couldn't understand anything they said. I can understand the lecture, I can understand all the textbook, but I can't understand normal conversation. After a while, they just really get familiar with me. They say, at the beginning, we thought you have antisocial some sort of problem. I'm just like, no, I don't have any social problems. Yeah, they just, now some of them still think I'm weird just because the first impression is I'm so quiet.
Alex Bartell used to run the Language Centre at the University of Technology, Sydney. He has been a long-standing advocate for higher English language entry standards for universities.
Academic staff increasingly are frustrated by the fact that they are there to teach pharmacy or engineering or IT or whatever they're teaching, and they basically say, it is not my job to help somebody with 65 spelling errors on the first page of an assignment. It's not my job to teach them basic English grammar.
Although the federal government has abandoned a national standard, the International English Language Testing System, or IELTS for short, still recommends a score of 7 out of 9 for university entry. But most students arrive here with far lower scores than that, scores as low as 4.5.
They're coming in believing that if the university says that I require an IELTS 5.5, I believe the university and I trust them that they have told me the truth about what's required. Now I find that, in fact, to be able to read the text that I'm asked to read in my degree course, I find that I don't understand what it is. I don't understand the questions that I'm asked in assessment tasks.
You both have such wonderful English, but do you think other international students, do you think that's their biggest challenge?
It is.
Actually,
It is. One of my friends, he came from China. We did the foundation study, so we are really used to it. But he just came straight away here, and he says he has headache listening to English.
Depends on which kind of Chinese. If you meet some Chinese, they just play with Chinese. They will never improve their English forever.
In fact, in the beginning, Iris and Josie could not speak or write in English well enough to get entry to their degrees. But like thousands of others, the university still offered them a place as long as they completed a one-year bridging program, which involves a 10 to 20-week language course. Students who complete these pathway or foundation programs are never then subjected to another IELTS exam and are funneled into the first or even second year of their degree program.
Of course it's a loophole, because some of them fail and some of them don't fail. And that's the shocking thing as far as I'm concerned, is those students who come into second year or even the first year with a very, very low language proficiency level who manage to pass through their courses.
Often their emails and their essays are almost impossible to decipher. That's in a very small proportion of cases, but that does beg the question, have these students passed the basic test for university entry in terms of written English?
And some of these are students that are at the end of their degree.
And some of these students are at the end of their degree. It's horrifying. I don't know what to say about that.
2 months ago, Dr. Zena O'Connor invited Four Corners into the life of a modern academic. She teaches units for the Design and Architecture faculty, and as one of a rising number of casuals, O'Connor teaches online, from home, and with little faculty support. It's an isolating experience, but it's a big money spinner for the University of Sydney.
I teach one subject, bringing in between 250,000 and 450,000. It's one elective. There are hundreds of other electives. There are hundreds of other core subjects. Each of these are bringing in similar amounts of money. The income stream, particularly from international students, is huge. Make no mistake, it is huge.
At Sydney University, international students now make up a quarter of all enrolments. At other universities like RMIT in Melbourne, they're almost 50% of the cohort. With thousands of students often struggling with English, the pressure to pass is helping to fuel a black market.
I'm staggered by the increase in plagiarism. To start with, in my experience, it was a very small proportion. You know, maybe 2, 3, 4%. I would peg it now at being much, much higher, well over 50%. And some of the cases of extreme plagiarism, where a student has plagiarised at least 80%, if not up to 100% of their paper, that proportion is growing. And that level of extreme plagiarism I didn't see 5, 10 years ago. The students handed in their first assignments. The deadline was last Friday, so I'm just finishing off the marking of those now.
And you'll submit these.
We caught up again with O'Connor recently to see how her class is performing. Of the 53 papers she'd marked, half had earned a fail.
As you can see from this list, all of the students who've been highlighted, they've got very bad marks, and the reason for that predominantly is they've either plagiarised or cut and pasted to such an extent that they've earned themselves a fail mark. As you see from some of the marks, 10, 15, 18, those students have plagiarised probably more than 80% in their assignments, yeah.
And you've written here, in fact...
The results are indicative of the pattern she has seen for years.
It's probably more than 80%.
She hasn't instituted formal proceedings against any students for plagiarism because she says she was told to do all she could to pass them.
And the response would be, thank you for your feedback. And that has been the same response every time I bring it to the attention of anyone at university. And that seems to be the end of it. It's not investigated.
And what about the individual students involved?
They're offered another chance to resubmit and another chance.
So all those...
Zena O'Connor says as a sessional academic, she has been left on her own to manage this problem.
It seems to me that there is an unwritten rule not to fail students. That isn't spoken about, but I'm advised to give students every concession possible, every opportunity to resubmit and resubmit, even when the semester is finished, and so on.
We approached Sydney University's Vice-Chancellor, Michael Spence, for an interview, but he declined. In a statement, the university said Dr. Spence will soon chair a task force on academic misconduct. It also said international students must meet stringent entry requirements, including English language proficiency.
So why a tutorial on academic dishonesty and plagiarism? so we know what's expected of us?
Yeah. It's to make sure that everyone is on the same page as to what your responsibilities are in...
Plagiarism is now such a problem, it's the focus of one of the very first tutorials for all Sydney University nursing students.
In particular for us.
Are they on notice from here on in?
They're certainly aware, and therefore if something does happen, that they do something that is academically dishonest or is plagiarism, it then is, I suppose, harder for them to claim that it was reckless or innocently done. The presentation of work containing...
Associate Professor Murray Fisher explains the university's formal policy on plagiarism.
Then we have this thing called negligent and dishonest plagiarism.
The policy runs to 13 pages and describes an array of complex procedures.
Plagiarism means presenting another person's work as one's own work by presenting, copying or reproducing it without appropriate acknowledgement.
Many say formal procedures to tackle plagiarism are so bureaucratic, they actually deter academics from reporting it.
Separately.
To nail a student who has plagiarised is a very complex, lengthy administrative procedure. In other words, the student has to be identified, it has to be documented, it has to be proven, it has to be taken to a committee and so on and so on.
That process is quite onerous, and it's my experience that most sessional staff just don't bother. They just don't bother reporting it. They'll ask the student to resubmit instead.
The exponential of this plus A...
Another reason why plagiarism is underreported is the increase in casual teaching contracts. According to Queensland University's Professor Paul Freiters, renewal often depends on positive student evaluations.
For a sessional academic, this is career making or breaking, whether or not they are seen to be liked by their students. So teaching evaluations, which are effectively how do the students think about you, are make or break for their careers, whether or not they get tenure. And in that, it's definitely important for them not to be seen to go against the party line.
This is our main lab. There are other...
It might be dangerous to let weak students through a degree in design, but it's potentially deadly in nursing.
Mimics the real setting of a hospital.
Until last year, Barbara Beale was a lecturer at one of the biggest nursing faculties in the country, the University of Western Sydney. She is speaking out tonight because she fears some UWS nursing graduates may not be safe working with sick patients.
Do you think it's the case, Barbara, that students have got through and graduated with a degree from UWS in nursing who shouldn't have been allowed to do so?
Yes, I do think that is the case. I do.
For Barbara, nursing has been a lifelong love. She had worked as a registered nurse and midwife for decades. But for the next 26 years, she was an academic at UWS, rising to acting department head. In 2012, just 2 years before she retired, she was awarded a Vice-Chancellors Excellence in Teaching Award. But now she laments what she says is a dramatic fall in standards.
A lot of students end up in the aged care sector. Who do we have in the aged care sector? The most vulnerable, ill people. And we have students who may have been pushed through university looking after them. Now, in the aged care sector, there is not much supervision. Very quickly, they might find themselves being the only registered nurse on duty, and that is something that frightens me.
An incident at this private Sydney hospital supports Beale's concerns. In 2009, a new nurse who had just graduated from UWS, Bharvesh Shah, fed a medicine cup of morning fresh dishwashing liquid to a 79-year-old man, mistaking it for his usual medication. Authorities found Shah had not been able to read the label on the bottle. After being registered as a nurse, Shah had failed English language tests 6 times. In 2013, he was struck off. A reviewer assisting a Healthcare Complaints Commission probe found the incident defies belief. And in its finding, the Nursing and Midwifery Tribunal said he lacks the necessary proficiency in reading and writing to be a registered nurse in whom the general public can repose trust.
This concerns me because there are many academics there who are trying to do the right thing, and probably that student had been reported or it had been documented somewhere in their undergraduate studies, and yet they still graduated. So how did they graduate?
At least 2 other UWS graduates have also been forced out by hospitals, losing their registration for poor English and dangerous practices. UWS says there have been no similar cases since 2011. But Barbara Beale says there was constant pressure at UWS to pass failing Bachelor of Nursing students.
I marked a student's work and I gave the student 2 out of 30 because I thought, well, I'll give them something for trying. And when we went to the cross-marking meeting, this is where a lot of things happen at these cross-marking meetings, I said, I think you need to look at this one, but she handed it to someone else. So the next person, who was an inexperienced academic, gave that student a pass mark.
Nursing is Beale objected again and again and says that it was only after the paper passed through the hands of 3 reviewers that the fail was upheld.
I was so upset. That was a very defining day, because if I hadn't really pressed that, if it had been somebody who had less experience or, I don't know, less conviction or something, that student would have passed.
This person, would they have been safe in a hospital?
No. No way. I've just seen what I think is the standard dropping, and year after year after year. So Sharon and I talk a lot about that, don't we?
I think it's a sense of disappointment because I think both of us have loved our nursing careers.
You've published together.
One of Barbara's long-standing colleagues and friends, Dr. Sharon Hillage, shares her concerns about UWS. Concerns which extend not only to international students, but also local students of non-English speaking background. Hillage says she resisted pressure to pass weaker students, but fears that other, more junior academics may have succumbed.
Might have failed. There were some that definitely passed students that I would have believed should not have passed.
Sharon Hillage stands up for what she believes in. Like Barbara, she too has been a nurse for more than 40 years. And 7 years ago, she was among a group of academics who quit the Australian Catholic University. They were concerned about falling standards.
Ultimately, what we've got to do is produce a safe practitioner, and I didn't believe that those students would be safe practitioners. So, yes, it was morally and ethically abhorrent to me.
Midway through 2008, the New South Wales Nursing and Midwifery Board raised concerns that ACU students were not completing the approved curriculum. It was worried they were unsafe to practice. It was at that very time that Hillage was delivering a unit on ethics to final year students. For a major class assignment, she failed 36 of them for serious plagiarism.
I got a phone call or an email from a student saying that the secretary to my boss had indicated that she was going to be given half marks for her assessment task, and would I please change the results? And I can tell you I was rather annoyed.
Hillage gathered her colleagues and marched to the office of the then head of the nursing school.
I gathered the teaching staff because I think they were all as indignant as I was, and I wanted to have people witness the fact that we had actually indicated that we were not going to pass those students. I was initially not given entree, and finally I insisted on having at least 5 minutes, and I was clearly instructed that I was to pass those students, and I clearly indicated that I would not be passing those students, and I had the support of my teaching team.
Four Corners has spoken to former colleagues who corroborate Hillage's account of the meeting. Sharon Hillage left the university shortly afterwards. but the majority of students whose papers she had failed for academic dishonesty were registered just months later as graduate nurses.
I think I was more angry about the injustice of it all, that in actual fact this plagiarism would just be condoned. So here we are, we're trying to produce students that will be ethical, that won't alter medication charts, will not do all of those things, and yet they could be given half marks. I was just mortified.
Another ACU nursing academic was so disturbed at the situation, she reported it to the then Federal Health Minister, Nicola Roxon. I, as did several others of my colleagues, chose to leave the university where I had tenure, primarily because of increasing concern about students being admitted into the Bachelor of Nursing degree with extraordinarily poor basic English. She went on to say they were pressured to administer Clayton's type assignments to pass students.
There have been specific cases where marks have been adjusted after the teacher has given them in the nursing faculty.
That was something was asked sometimes to occur.
Tell me what happened on those occasions.
Well, basically we said no, we're not doing it.
It's hard to get exactly...
Dr Tony Stokes is an ACU senior lecturer in economics who has previously been asked to remark papers in nursing subjects. He concedes there is still pressure today to pass students.
I am aware there may be still some areas where people are being called upon to justify the number of students they're failing. I had a colleague who was in the business school and he explained to me that he'd been told that he was expected to fail no more than 10%.
It was not until 2012 that the Australian Catholic University mandated the use of anti-plagiarism software to assist academics to identify cheats.
I was aware that anti-plagiarism software existed. I'm clearly not sure why it hadn't been implemented in the school where we were working. Certainly it wasn't there at the time.
I know even from my time as head of school, I was saying, when can we get the plagiarism software? When can we get the plagiarism software? Oh, we're trying to pick out a good software that will work, blah, 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 blah. I've been asking it for it for years. People in the faculty had been asking for it, but it was a long process.
But the point is that Turnitin and software platforms like that, they were commonplace at Australian university campuses in the period at which ACU did not have it.
Yes.
The Vice-Chancellors of both ACU and UWS, Professor Greg Craven and Professor Barney Glover, also declined interview requests. In a statement, ACU said it takes the matter of honesty very seriously and that it follows policies to investigate incidents and students are disciplined appropriately. Meanwhile, UWS stated it too took academic misconduct seriously and that it completely rejects the accusation that the standard of our nursing program is falling and our nursing students are weak and unsafe. The academics who have spoken out tonight are not alone in their concerns. In our research for this program, we spoke with scores of academics around Australia. The vast majority had witnessed or personally experienced the pressure to ignore plagiarism and to pass weak students. But they were too scared to appear on camera. Many feared it would be the end of their careers.
Speaking to Four Corners, what do you think will happen as a result of you speaking out on this?
I doubt that I'll be employed again next semester.
We have a number of academics who spoke to us about the pressure they feel to pass students that they believe should not have passed. In one case, an academic described where he had failed 50% of a class and under pressure had to reconsider and ended up only failing 20%. In another case, an academic had his class remarked without him being told, and an increased number of students passed.
Universities have long denied this to be true. One academic who has applied her training to the question is economist and statistician Dr. Gigi Foster. She spent 3 years getting access to student performance data from 2 major universities, neither of which were her current institution, the University of New South Wales. Foster found statistical evidence confirming a trend towards marks being inflated in classes with many international students.
If you have a larger fraction of weaker students in a given course, then you would expect at the end of the course that you'd end up with a distribution of marks which was commensurately lower. It seems to be that there is an adjustment made in response to a large fraction of international students, such that everybody's marks get buoyed up a little bit.
Her findings lent scientific credibility to the claims of so many academics around the country that poorly performing students were still passing.
So that's essentially the puzzle, is that you would expect the marks to be lower in courses where there are larger fractions of demonstrably weaker students, and they don't seem to be lower.
The participating universities were clearly unimpressed with Foster's findings and withdrew their cooperation.
So I was hoping to, be able to continue the research, but the data feeds stopped after this paper came out.
Why?
You'd have to ask the universities.
Foster's research focused on international students, but many academics have told Four Corners there are other threats to standards. At ACU, for example, university entrance levels for domestic students, or ATARs, have plummeted by as many as 20 percentage points.
I think Professor Craven, our Vice-Chancellor, has had the view that we need to grow to survive in this sort of competitive marketplace. So as a result, he did lower the ATARs to let in a lot more students than we had previously.
This has led to dramatic reductions in the difficulty of some courses being taught, although Tony Stokes doesn't agree.
30% of our students have not completed Year 11 and 12 maths, and some of them just have blockages in terms of doing basic maths like division, subtraction and drawing graphs.
But if you haven't done Year 12 maths, doesn't economics rely on some basic calculus?
It doesn't have to. What we tend to do is use computers more to actually solve the same sort of problems.
ICAC's Robert Waldesy says universities suffer a real conflict of interest between recruitment on one hand and standards on the other.
One of them will win out. Too often we believe that it's weighted more towards the recruitment and revenue and away from the controls on standards.
In the past, you've failed students who've done poorly, and you were going to talk...
Ironically, the victims of this conflict are often the students themselves.
From students, if they do in fact fail, I'm often inundated with emails from them pleading, begging me to pass them.
International students are sometimes in great distress.
Dear Zena, my name is, my student number is, I don't know why I failed, I want to die now. The student then goes on to say, I want to die now again. This isn't unusual. I get quite a lot of emails of this nature.
It's pretty intense.
Many are desperate to avoid returning home empty-handed.
I'm begging you to recheck my final mark. I will do anything that you say.
I mean, is that an invitation to some kind of bribery or something?
I would hate to think what that is all about.
These sort of emails are a symptom of the problems that are created by the tension between capabilities that fall short of the demands of the university. And it puts students in increasingly desperate situations. For some students, there really are few other options to try and pass. They may offer bribes to the academics may exploit the students. But that is what we mean by it being conducive to corruption.
In 2009, Western Australia's Corruption and Crime Commission held public hearings into Nasrul Ali, a Curtin University finance lecturer.
I think it would make life a lot easier if I gave you a pass.
The academic had been targeting international female students, one of whom secretly recorded him.
It's more about making it worth me changing your mark. You need to offer me a non-academic.
The CCC found he was attempting to solicit sexual favours in return for higher grades.
So you will see cheating, you will see students who are increasingly desperate. Where students are increasingly desperate, academics will or might take advantage of them.
Getting experts to help you on school assignments was never this easy and affordable.
there are plenty of other underground transactions thriving in universities.
When a friend asks me how I ace all courses with minimum effort, I simply recommend them.
Including a lively trade in essays.
This essay, Zena, Colour in Architecture.
To test how easy it is, Zena O'Connor gave us permission to try to sell one of her old essays online.
$35.
$35.
That's all, I'm afraid.
Two salad sandwiches and a couple of coffees.
Four Corners also tried to buy an essay.
Hi, can I buy essay by cash?
We accept PayPal.
We chose a website offering essays to students in Australia, the UK and the US, assignmenthelp.net. We asked if they could guarantee the essay would not be detected by the anti-plagiarism software used by universities called Turnitin.
Can you make sure it's okay with Turnitin? I don't want to get caught.
Yes, price $100. You can pay in cash, but for that you need to visit our office. You can give payment to Jimmy.
Peter sent us to see Jimmy at this ordinary suburban home in Werrington Downs in the western suburbs of Sydney.
G'day. Here to see Jimmy about buying an essay.
No one here by that name.
It wasn't Jimmy, but a man named Jeffrey. He said he knew nothing about the essay business, but at the same time, he wasn't surprised to see me.
I used to run a mail forwarding business.
Oh, yeah?
But that finished.
This mail redirection service has had clients with a colourful history. A decade ago, the house was listed as the address for Chancery International University, a bogus institute selling fake degrees.
We looked up the address and it's been associated with all kinds of scams like diploma mills 10 years ago and other weird online businesses.
One of the reasons I got out of the business is because we had the Commonwealth Police arrive here at 7 o'clock one morning along with Customs. Someone had tried to forward human growth hormone through us.
Wow.
These kind of transactions don't surprise Barmak Nasirian. The US has been grappling with corruption of university admissions head-on.
We have had instances of major public institutions naively entering the international recruitment business and accepting students from China who submitted transcripts, but that later on proved to have been significantly altered and inaccurate. And that institution took those students in and graduated them.
Just last month, armed Homeland Security officers raided this university in California, arresting 3 staff on suspicion of trading visas and enrolments for cash. No one wants to see these scenes on Australian campuses. But administrators can't turn off the tap on international students. They see no alternative to refill their coffers.
It's become relatively clear that for any one university to raise its standards of either English proficiency or other credentials or capabilities alone would only hurt that university. There is little gain for one university to step out of the pack.
Universities are now stuck in an arms race. Students and standards are merely collateral damage.
At the end of the day, Australian universities are governed by Australians, and they really need to make a decision whether they're willing to undermine the credibility, the international credibility of credentials they manufacture in the name of more business.
Education is not an industry, and this is the mistake that the universities are making. Education is not an industry.
Of course, these same academics, these same universities, these same courses are processing Australian students as well. Are they somehow untouched by the kinds of activities and concerns revealed tonight? Given what's at stake, it's unfortunate the Vice-Chancellors of the 3 universities featured in our story, Sydney, Western Sydney and the Australian Catholic University, couldn't front up in person and face the obvious questions. Their unedited statements can be found on our website, and responses from the universities who use Shiny Way Agency and Edu Global Agency in Beijing are also on the website. Next week, an extraordinary inside look at the Kurdish militia's fight against ISIS. Until then, good night.